Have you ever considered that the language you speak, like every single day, might actually be hardwiring your brain?
That is a pretty massive question.
Right. And I'm not just talking about how it shapes your culture or, that old trivia about how many words you have for snow.
Oh, yeah, the snow thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But what if the literal grammar coming out of your mouth right now is either hardwiring your brain for or actively working against your ability to understand complex mathematics and quantum physics?
It's a truly radical premise because,
And
I mean, we generally just assume the language we speak is a neutral vehicle for thought, a passive tool we use to describe the world.
yeah, exactly. Just a tool.
But the stack of linguistic, mathematical, and philosophical notes we're looking at today suggests something completely different. It suggests that the tool itself dictates what kind of reality you are even capable of building.
So today, our mission is to dive into a stack of really mind-bending papers that explore this idea through the lens of one specific language, which is Haitian Creole. Historically, colonial powers completely dismissed Haitian Creole as like a simplified or broken language.
Mm.
But the sources we have today propose an astonishing theory.
They do. They argue that Haitian Creole is actually structurally optimized for formal, discrete mathematics, computer science, and even quantum mechanics.
Which is just wild to think about. We're going to break down how a language born on colonial plantations secretly operates like pure computer code, why theoretical physicists wish they could speak it, and the theological argument that this was all by divine design.
Okay, let's unpack this because we are looking at a wild collision of syntax, theoretical physics, and theology.
We are indeed. And, well, to understand this, we really have to start at the foundation. We have to look at how Haitian Creole, or HCC, maps directly to discrete mathematics.
Okay.
And specifically to a concept in logic called lambda calculus. We need to look at the mechanics and how the syntax natively mimics the absolute purity of mathematical logic. So if you're listening to this and, remembering how much you struggled to memorize Spanish or French verb tables in high school, you are going to love this next part.
Oh, definitely.
Because when most of us think of a language like French, which obviously gave a ton of vocabulary to Haitian Creole, we think of those massive, complicated conjugation charts.
Yeah, French is a perfect point of contrast here. It has what linguists call rich, complex inflectional morphology.
Which is a very fancy way of saying what, exactly?
It's a technical way of saying the verbs change shape depending on who is speaking, when they're speaking, and the mood of the sentence. The data is highly bundled together.
Right, it's all mashed into one word.
Exactly. But Haitian Creole operates on a completely different architecture. It has incredibly minimal inflectional morphology. The verb stem itself, it just doesn't change at all. Instead, it uses these discrete, independent pre-verbal markers.
Okay, hold on. You're saying there are literally no conjugations? Like if I'm speaking French or English, I know if something happened yesterday or tomorrow based on the ending of the verb itself. I walk or I will walk.
Right, the ed ending in English.
Yeah. So if Haitian Creole doesn't do that, isn't it incredibly confusing to figure out when anything is happening?
See, that is the genius of its structure. It solves the timeline problem with those pre-verbal markers I mentioned. Take the phrase, te ap mo.
Mange, got it.
Manger is the invariant verb stem for eat. It never changes. Te is a completely separate, discrete marker for the past. And ap is a discrete marker for the progressive, meaning an ongoing action.
Oh, wow. So it's literally just stacking the concepts right next to each other.
Functionally, yes. Te ap manger acts exactly like a mathematical formula. It's past applied to progressive applied to eat. In computer science terms, it behaves exactly like a finite state transducer.
Okay, let's break that term down for the listener, because a finite state transducer sounds incredibly intimidating.
It sounds worse than it is. Think of a finite state transducer, like a simple gumball machine.
A gumball machine.
Yeah, you put a specific coin in, you turn the crank, a specific gumball comes out. There is no hidden, messy internal logic. It is entirely predictable.
I love that.
You add the past T marker to eat, and it perfectly outputs with eating every single time. You can model these verb phrases as a regular grammar where these markers simply slot into predictable places before an unchanging vocabulary word.
Looking at this through the lens of computer programming, It makes so much sense. I mean, think of French or even English, like a really messy legacy code base.
Oh, totally.
You've got all these bundled exceptions, irregular verbs like go turning into went. It's data that is completely tangled up in the structure itself. It's spaghetti code.
That is a highly accurate analogy.
But Haitian Creole is like a perfectly clean, elegant, functional programming language.
Right.
Every single piece of data is handled separately.
Right, because in a pure functional programming language, which is based on that lambda calculus we mentioned earlier, you want pure functions and clean variables. And, well, Haitian Creole does this with pronouns too.
Really? The pronouns are clean too.
Yes, the pronouns like when for I or my or lie for he, she, or it, they have no gender and no case inflection at all.
Meaning they don't change form whether they are the subject doing the action or the object receiving the action.
Correct. They act as perfectly clean bound variables. In logic, a bound variable is just a clean pointer to a piece of information. The HEC pronouns are just pointers to a referent, completely free of morphological noise.
Wait, let me make sure I'm getting this. I have to push back here for a second. Because human beings are messy.
We certainly are.
We have complex feelings, sarcasm, cultural nuances, idioms. If the grammar is basically just pure math and simple gumball machines, how does it handle the massive, chaotic encyclopedia of human life?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't fit into a neat, discrete equation.
That is the exact tension the sources address. And the solution the language evolved is brilliant. It introduces a concept called phrase as lemma, or phrasal lemmas.
Phrasal lemmas. Okay, what does that mean?
Well, a lemma is basically just a single dictionary entry. Because Haitian Creole lacks that rich word-building machinery we see in French.
Like building words with endless suffixes and prefixes.
Exactly. Because it lacks that, it builds complex meaning by treating multi-word phrases as single, opaque lexical units, constants in mathematical terms.
So the language takes the whole phrase and basically glues it together so it functions as a single word.
What's fascinating here is how the syntax stays perfectly clean because all the messy human complexity is hidden inside these vocabulary chunks.
Yeah.
Let me give you a concrete example from the text.
Yeah, please.
The phrase tête ensemble literally translates to head together, but in practice, it means intelligent.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So the grammatical syntax doesn't have to analytically compute the relationship between the word head and the word together every time someone says it. The whole phrase is stored in the brain and retrieved as a single opaque block of meaning.
Oh, there's another great example in the notes, too. The phrase beitet o, which literally means something like give your head.
Right.
But it actually translates to surrender or give up.
Precisely. If you try to parse that compositionally, word by word, you get totally lost. But as a phrasal lemma, it is a single unit of meaning.
So if we go back to the programming analogy, this is exactly like a software engineer hiding a massive, complex, chaotic algorithm inside a black box function.
Yes. The main code base, the grammar, just calls the function. It doesn't need to know how the function works internally.
So the grammar stays perfectly clean and simple, and all the messy, complicated human encyclopedia just gets shoved into the vocabulary like a junk drawer.
Basically, yes.
The syntax stays pure, and it just retrieves these prepackaged chunks of complexity. That is an incredibly efficient way to distribute cognitive load.
It pays the complexity cost upfront at the level of vocabulary acquisition. I mean, a speaker has to learn thousands of these phrasal chunks to save on the processing power needed for real-time sentence construction.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If Haitian Creole is this perfectly clean engine for processing chunks of meaning, what is it uniquely equipped to describe? Because, the sources take a massive leap here straight into theoretical physics.
They do. They bring in the work of the renowned physicist David Bohm. Bohm was... Well, he was deeply frustrated by the English language and Indo-European languages in general.
Oh, they're too rigid, right?
Yeah, he felt that our languages are far too noun-heavy and static to describe the actual fluid reality of quantum mechanics.
This totally makes sense to me. In English, language forces us to see the world like a photograph. It's like a snapshot of distinct bounded objects. A cat, a mat, an electron.
Exactly.
It forces us to describe the world as a collection of separate objects that just occasionally bump into each other and do things.
But Bohm understood that quantum reality isn't a photograph. It isn't a collection of fragmented, static objects. It is a flowing, undivided, process-based reality. The universe is more like a continuous movie.
Right.
Bohm was actually so frustrated by the limitations of English that he tried to invent a brand new language, which he called the Rio mode.
Rio meaning flow, I assume.
Yes. He wanted to invent a language that was native to process and flow, rather than native to static nouns. A language that could natively speak the reality of quantum mechanics.
And the sources argue that Haitian Creole natively achieves what David Bohm was trying to invent from scratch in a laboratory. That is crazy.
Let's look at how it does it. Take Haitian Creole's bare nouns, a word like mound. In English, if you're talking about a person, you immediately have to specify the boundaries. Is it a person? Is it the people?
We have to box it in.
You must individuate the concept into bounded objects. But in Haitian Creole, mound is underspecified. It doesn't necessarily refer to a bounded physical object at all. It can evoke an activity or a process.
So instead of pointing to a static person, it's closer to the concept of, like, humaning.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. The noun is fluid.
Okay, but if the nouns are fluid and act like processes, how does the language map time and action? I mean, we talked about those Gumbel machine preverbal markers earlier.
This is where it perfectly maps to Bohm's ideas. Those aspect-heavy markers, like ap for ongoing flow, fec for emergent process, te for completed flow, and a for projected flow.
Right.
They act as flow operators. They aren't just rigid points on a timeline, like a strict past, present, future. They actually map the topology of time as a continuous unfolding wave.
The source notes point to a specific grammatical feature called the serial verb construction to highlight this. And the example given is lire en mangeant.
Literally, that translates to he took food, went. Now,
Yeah.
in English or French, our analytical grammar forces us to chop that reality into two discrete events. He took the food, and then he left.
We segment the reality.
Exactly. But in Haitian Creole, this serial verb construction treats the action as one undivided movement.
So the language doesn't see a guy grabbing an apple, stopping, and then walking out the door. It just sees one continuous flow of taking and going.
Yes, and that perfectly captures Bohm's quantum concepts of the hollow movement and the implicate order.
Mind-blowing.
In quantum physics, the universe isn't a bunch of billiard balls hitting each other. It's a single, undivided ocean wave. Everything is implicated in everything else. Haitian Creole natively expresses this. The action isn't fragmented. It is a single, complex process.
Okay, so this is just incredible. We have language that maps seamlessly to finite state automata, pure functional programming, and the undivided ocean wave of quantum physics.
It really is remarkable.
So what does this all actually, I have to ask the obvious question here. If Haitian Creole is essentially a linguistic superpower for advanced mathematics and physics, where are all the Haitian Creole physics papers? Where are the category theory textbooks written in this language?
That is the crucial reality check, and the sources are very clear on this. To understand the absence of those papers, we have to look impartially at the colonial history detailed in the notes.
Right. The history is dark.
It is. Formal scientific discourse requires a cultivated register. It requires a standardized, agreed-upon vocabulary for complex concepts. And it requires massive institutional support. Haitian Creole has been systematically denied that sociolinguistic infrastructure due to French colonial suppression.
I mean, the educational system in Haiti, historically, literally forced students to learn in French, right?
Yeah.
It was the language of power.
The sources explain that to succeed, to enter the world of formal academia or government, speakers had to discard their native cognitive architecture and adopt French. It wasn't that HC lacked the structural capacity to do high-level math. It was completely politically and historically marginalized.
But there are people pushing back against that institutional legacy now, which is awesome. The notes mention a linguist named Michel de Graaf at MIT.
Yes. Michel de Graaf, whose background is actually in computer science, is currently using Haitian Creole pedagogically for STEM education.
Wow, really?
He recognized from a computational perspective that the language is incredibly well-behaved. It is predictable, transparent, and computationally tractable. He is actively proving that it is a highly effective medium of instruction for math and physics.
But the research level, like the global academic stage, is still entirely dominated by the colonial languages. The notes highlight an incredible group of Haitian diaspora mathematicians to illustrate this.
Yes, they do.
Guys like Lucien Hibbert, who got the first Haitian PhD in mathematics in Paris all the way back in 1937, or Louis Beaugry, working in complex cyclic codes, or Lionel Fibeau, who has over 100 published articles in variational analysis.
These are brilliant minds making significant novel contributions to highly complex, abstract mathematical fields. But the reality is that they were forced to publish their work in French or English just to be recognized by the academic establishment.
Just think about the cognitive tax of that. Their native cognitive architecture, that beautiful, process-oriented, pure functional engine we've been talking about was completely masked by standard mathematical registers.
It's tragic in a way.
Right. They were thinking the math in a quantum-optimized language, but they were forced to translate it into a messy legacy code base just to get published.
And this sheer resilience of Haitian Creole, the fact that this highly efficient cognitive code survived centuries of institutional attempts to erase it, well, it led the authors of our sources to look for historical precedents
Right.
and to find a language with a similar survival story and a similar process-based structure. They actually had to go all the way back to antiquity.
This is where we go from lambda calculus and quantum physics straight into biblical Hebrew, which I did not see coming.
The structural parallels between the two are really remarkable. The sources note that Haitian Creole's cognitive architecture shares profound traits with the ancient Hebrew of the scriptures.
In what way?
Well, like Haitian Creole, Biblical Hebrew prioritizes process and action over bounded static objects. Both use aspect, the flow and mode of an action, over rigid, timeline-based tense.
And the sources mention that both rely heavily on something called parataxis.
Right, parataxis. That is simply the coordination of ideas without complex hierarchy. It's linking things side by side, like beads on a string.
Like, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened.
Exactly. That is parataxis. It is the exact opposite of hierarchical subordination, where you have complicated nested clauses inside other clauses, which you see a lot in English or Latin.
Got it.
Furthermore, both languages rely heavily on contextual resolution. They don't overspecify meaning with exhaustive grammatical rules. They just allow the context of the conversation to resolve the variables.
So we have a marginalized Caribbean language, born out of the brutal conditions of the transatlantic slave trade, structurally echoing the ancient language of the Hebrew scriptures.
It's quite a connection.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most provocative framework in our sources. We need to unpack this carefully and impartially, as it steps fully into a specific theological perspective called generative Christology.
Right. To impartially report on the claims made in these texts, the generative Christology perspective argues that Haitian Creole is not just a random product of linguistic evolution or historical accident. It views the language as a tongue given by the Spirit.
And just to clarify, they don't mean speaking in tongues like ecstatic, unintelligible noise in a church service.
No, not at all. In this specific theological view, it is about generative linguistic creation. The argument is that the Spirit produced a cognitive and linguistic structure that actively exceeds the natural constraints of the harsh environment it was born into.
Okay, so if we connect this to the bigger picture the sources present, they tackle the biblical story of the Tower of Babel. The Curse of Babel is basically the idea that human language was fragmented to cause confusion.
Yes. And the generative Christology framework argues that this fragmentation was set aside or overcome by the Spirit.
But crucially, not by just dropping a magical, ready-made perfect language out of the sky.
No, instead, the theology proposes that the Spirit worked through the messy, violent, evolutionary contact of French and West African languages on those colonial plantations.
The theological claim here is that the result of that incredibly dark historical collision is a divinely optimized architecture, a mathematically pure language generated specifically through a marginalized, unauthorized medium.
Precisely. The colonial powers meant to suppress, enslave, and control, providing only the fractured fragments of the French language to the enslaved populations. But the generative outcome was a language, a brilliant cognitive tool that structurally surpasses the dominant colonial language in its capacity to model pure logic, flowing reality, and complex process.
Wow.
In this theological framework, the mathematical purity we discussed at the top of the hour isn't just a fun linguistic curiosity. It is evidence of a divine design operating quietly beneath the notice of the empires that thought they were in complete control.
That is just a staggering way to look at history, language, and human resilience. I mean, to view the very grammar of Haitian Creole, the gumble machine verbs, of the black box phrasal lemmas, the quantum-ready fluid nouns, as this quiet, enduring triumph over suppression.
It forces a complete reevaluation of what we consider complex or advanced language.
Yeah, it really does.
In Western education, we've been taught to look at the massive morphological rule books of European languages, the endless conjugation tables, as the absolute pinnacle of intellectual expression. But this deep analysis suggests that true complexity and true elegance might look a lot more like beautiful computer code. clean, functional, and deeply process-oriented.
What an incredible journey this deep dive has been. We started by looking at how the bare-bones grammar of Haitian Creole acts like a pure, functional programming language, cleanly processing actions without hidden baggage.
And we saw how it hides the messy reality of human life inside those phrasal lemmas so the grammar doesn't get bogged down.
From there, we mapped those clean, flowing processes onto David Bohm's dream of a quantum language. We saw how a language can natively express an undivided, flowing universe without being dragged down by the illusion of static nouns.
Then we looked at the sobering history of how that brilliant cognitive architecture has been actively masked and suppressed by colonial education, forcing brilliant Haitian mathematicians to code switch just to participate in the global scientific community.
And finally, we explored the generative Christology perspective, drawing those wild parallels to biblical Hebrew and impartially exploring the theological claim that this language is a divine optimization born in the margins.
It is a profound synthesis of discrete mathematics, theoretical physics, history, and theology. It truly challenges our deepest assumptions about the tools we use to think.
It really does. Which brings me back to the thought we started with and a thought I want to leave you, the listener, with today. We have spent centuries assuming that the language of advanced science, the absolute pinnacle of human reasoning, inherently looks like French or English or German.
The languages of the dominant institutions.
Right. But if the very grammar we speak limits our scientific intuition, if our messy legacy code-based languages are literally forcing our brains to see a fragmented universe, it leaves you with a massive question to mull over.
It certainly does.
What massive breakthroughs in quantum physics and category theory and our fundamental understanding of the universe are currently trapped? What discoveries are waiting just out of reach simply because we are forcing all our brightest minds to use the imperfect, noun-heavy grammar of the languages we arbitrarily decided were standard? What could we see? What could we finally understand about reality if we learned to think in a language truly built for the flow of the universe?
This raises an incredibly important question for all of us about the limits of our own perception. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.